It's good practice to format your SQL for readability, so when you or someone else has to read it later, it's easier to understand. White space is ignored in SQL, so it's convenient to format. For example, in this SQL statement we have three clauses: a select clause, a from clause, and a where clause. I tend to put each of these on a separate line, so I'm just going to move them along there. And I indent them under the parts that they relate to. In this case, both the from clause and the where clause are operating on the select clause. And so I indent them under the select. Now we can just run this so that you can see that it actually does work. SQL ignores the white space, and space characters as well as new line characters are all considered white space. And so this statement operates exactly the same as if it were on one line, so functionally it's no different. But the formatting just makes it easier to read. Go ahead and type out this other SQL statement. Here's a more complex example. Now here's a more complex example, and I understand that this course has not yet covered all of these different parts. We will soon. But for the purpose of understanding the importance of formatting, it's good to take a look at this. We can see from the indentation that this from clause relates to the select clause. This join clause also relates to the select clause, and the on clause relates to join, and order relates to select. By virtue of the indentation and the formatting, it's much easier to read and much easier to understand this more complex select statement. One additional important note. Technically, according to the SQL standard, and we know that not all the vendors support the standard, every SQL statement must be terminated by a semicolon. And that's just according to the standard. In practice, you will rarely see the semicolon when there's only one SQL statement involved. If there's more than one SQL statement in the same context, you will usually see a semicolon separating them or sometimes terminating them, and that's a very picky distinction. But in practice, when there's only one statement, which is most of the time, you will not see the semicolon. So you just need to know that sometimes you'll see a semicolon, and there's very rarely you'll find an environment where it's actually required, and you'll know when you run across one of those, but most of the time you won't see it. You just need to know that the standard says it's supposed to be there.